It's crazy because like I literally I test everything, and it's hard
Yeah,
because it's working on when it's working on this end. It's really difficult to
yeah. Check it from the.
yeah. I guess I have to just do a hidden private video maybe before.
Hmm.
Um, okay, let's have a look. We'll know in about 5 seconds, I think, 10 seconds maybe.
Yeah.
If we got sound, we are. Um,
Back in business.
so look, just making a backup just in case. Yes, okay, we are back in business. Woo, we got sound.
Yay!
Yay. Okay. Sorry everybody. I'm not sure what was happening. We are back in business. This is the new link. I am gonna quickly post this. So you can bear with me for a few seconds. Just as I part two. For anybody, I posted it on the old one. If you're listening to this now, well, hopefully this can be edited out of here for the downloaded version on iTunes. Um, Back on, brilliant. Okay, yeah, there's multiple people saying, okay, that's good.
Great.
Great. So we were just discussing police and law enforcement, and you were speaking with Leap, but no longer Leap. I'm
Yeah,
not sure how much people heard of this, so maybe we can just go back a bit.
yeah,
Working with law enforcement, police officers who are essentially against prohibition.
yeah. So there are these organizations. LEAP is one of them. One of the big ones. Law Enforcement Action Partnership, as they are now called. It's originally from the US,
Yep.
actually, but there's a UK chapter. There's a chapter, I think, now in Germany, and like other European countries are also having their own chapters, and they're mostly indeed police officers, maybe mostly not active anymore, so
Mm-hmm.
maybe retired or have left the force, but they are speaking against the prohibition policies
Yeah.
because it's ineffective and it is sort of detrimental also for the work of the police in many ways.
Hinders them on I guess resources that they could be spending
Indeed,
on other things.
I mean, we had a little webinar on the Global Day of Action, so 26th of June, as part of the Support Don't Punish
Yep.
campaign, and we had Neil Woods from Leap UK as one of the speakers. We had Professor Nick Crofts from the Center of Law Enforcement and Public Health, and we had Larissa Meyer, who's a great researcher based in San Francisco, and we also had a bit of a video greeting from Clemente, who is part of the Students for Social, no, sorry, Students for Sensible Drug Policy
Okay.
in Ghana, and also Adam Winstock from Global Drug Survey also had a little
Okay.
video greeting, and we sort of tried to imagine the future of drug policing and then what could be done and what sort of would be the way forward.
Mm-hmm.
And We had a good discussion. The recording is on Drug Ventures YouTube
Yep.
channel. It was moderated by Thijs Roos, who's a Dutch drug journalist and a great guy. Has a really nice YouTube channel also called Controlled Substance.
I know this very,
Yeah.
very. Yep. Cool. Okay.
And So we tried to indeed have a discussion also with the police of different, what could be a different kind of strategy. And I get that in their line of work, I mean, they are usually the first responders when a problem arises. So they do see probably a lot of
The bad side of
the
things.
bad side
Yep.
of things. And I mean, the question is like, indeed, when if they see somebody who's having problems with drugs, if they don't bring them to jail or wherever, what do they do?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where would they direct them um, at that point? And I mean, at that point, there needs to be indeed resources or clinics that they can direct them. Because I
Yep.
mean, otherwise, they're like, I mean, what can they do besides indeed take them into custody or something? Um, but this issue uh, is something that I think more and more police are with, but are afraid to talk openly. And I mean, also, I mean, it's not necessarily their job to criticize or make laws or legislation. They are there to enforce it.
I
And in that
yeah.
sense, like it is the politicians who make the laws,
Yeah, that's
but
true.
they are, of course, been very vocal about maintaining the current
I
system
mean,
for
they are
whatever
human
reason.
beings, surely,
Yeah,
with like a moral obligation. I
yeah,
think like that transcends a job.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
indeed. And of course, we see it in the US now with the Black Lives Matter
mhm,
that the police, there's not just few bad apples. I mean, they're more than just few bad apples.
mhm,
And I mean, using that kind of excessive force, because I mean, I have a background in military police
yeah,
as a Finnish citizen, as a male Finnish citizen. I've had the compulsory military service, and I'm a sergeant in the military police, not active. I mean, I'm in the reserves, and it's not like Finland is at war, so it's not. It's more like Boy Scouts with guns in a way.
mm.
Uh,
Sounds kind of fun.
it was. I mean, I learned a few things that I hope I'll never have to
Yeah.
actually use. But I
How
mean,
often? Sorry, as a reserve, how often do you go
I
now?
mean, I know a lot of people that have never gone sort of back. I've been invited a couple of times to do a bit of extra training
Okay.
for whatever reason. I'm not entirely sure why.
Are you obliged to do it?
If you can come up with a really good reason that you can't, then you don't have to.
Hmm.
But I couldn't come up with a good reason back then.
Okay. uh,
But I mean, I've been trained indeed. Like there's with police, I mean, there's sort of steps of how much force you
hmm.
use in a situation. And I mean, of course, you use least in the beginning. Like I mean, try talking to a
Yeah.
person or like trying to convince them otherwise, and then but now it seems like people are just bursting into people's houses with like rifles, like assault rifles, and just sort of having like SWAT teams
Oh,
of like busting somebody with a little cannabis bush in their
yeah.
backyard or something. That like
Militarized police with,
exactly,
yeah.
it's just too excessive, and it doesn't. And I mean, we see from prevalence data, like I mean, it's not like drug use has gone down;
Mm-mm.
it continues rising. So you can argue that it's ineffective of as a prevention measure. I mean, somebody could argue that, okay, if we didn't have that, then prevalence rate would be even higher. It's hard to prove that either way, but I mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't really seem to like prevent people from using drugs. And I mean, there's,
There are death penalties in some countries for drugs, and people still use drugs.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah.
indeed. I mean, I think it's innate human nature that we just want to alter this consciousness
Of
of
course.
ours, and I mean for good and bad
Yeah.
sometimes, but it's there.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's not just humans, of course. I mean, there's dolphins, there's other
Hmm.
kinds of mammals who are also want to
Yeah.
get high sometimes.
I think it's important. Even like I was speaking to somebody last week about this. With have you been following the drugs law, the changes in the Netherlands?
But yeah, yeah,
So we're kind of trying to bring attention to this, and show and normalize, or show that like there are normal functioning adults,
yeah,
use drugs. Not everybody who drinks beer is an alcoholic. Not everybody who smokes weed is, or does
yeah,
drugs is a complete waster. And what we're trying to, we actually want to kind of bring attention, and not expose, what's the word, like interview and show a range of people who hopefully can, in positions of responsibility. It's unlikely that we're going to get
yeah,
politicians or lawyers to admit to using
yeah,
drugs on camera, but we would like to get people who are functioning adults
yeah,
to say, like, I'm a 30-year-old man, and I have, multiple businesses. I employ 30 people, and I use drugs occasionally, 3 or 4 times a year. I
yeah,
recreationally use drugs, and they do not have a negative
yeah,
impact. In fact, that they have a positive impact,
yeah,
on me.
yeah,
And I think it's important to try and bring that to the attention, because you see the bad side, and of
yeah,
course there's a bad side to,
yeah,
to
yeah,
everything.
yeah. Is
Yeah.
this called High Humans by any chance?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I've been interviewed
Already.
for High Humans,
Cool.
so
Great.
I'm looking forward. It was a very pleasant experience actually.
Nice.
So
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. I'm going to be interviewed
yeah,
for it as well.
yeah,
Like we've got this foundation that we set up, the BVND, and we're trying to yeah, just have a massive different a campaign that is going to
yeah,
span all different platforms, to try and just draw attention, because
yeah,
prohibition doesn't
yeah,
work.
yeah,
People are still going to get high, and if you make something illegal, right now the Netherlands is very progressive, and if they have something like in the UK where there's like a psychoactive substance ban,
yeah,
well, those people are going to turn to illegal drugs, which could be
yeah,
cut, which could have higher
yeah,
risk. There's
yeah,
and just making things of a taboo, it makes it hard to deal with the problems.
yeah. And I think what I know about the new upcoming change into the opium law here is that it's targeting at the moment like opioid analogs and maybe synthetic cannabinoids,
Yeah.
which is sort of hard to argue against as well. Because I mean, like those substances can indeed be quite dangerous and they can do damage. So it's hard to sort of make an argument like, no, we should not
Yeah.
have more regulations or enforcement for those substances. But it is sort of still in that sort of prohibition framework that somehow by prohibiting them, people not are not going to use them or they're not going to get their hands on them. That that's not the case.
No.
And
No.
indeed, if they start with these, they will probably then start adding other analog things
Yeah.
into there and this sort of continue prohibition, which it doesn't work. But then, and there are luckily now quite a lot of good reports from, for instance, Transform Drug Policy Foundation in the UK has a new book on stimulants coming out, and they have a lot of good reports of like, okay, if we don't prohibit, what do we do? What is legal regulation? What it actually looks like
Yeah.
in practice? And different substances can be dealt differently. I mean, I don't necessarily promote that crack cocaine should be sold at the smart shop, but maybe it's sort of a pharmacy kind of
Yeah.
thing where you, if you have a dependence and you have a prescription, then you can go and get your good quality
Yeah. Get a good quality
cocaine
crack.
with some, you know, ways of like safely using it as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, so that like crack cocaine in a pharmacy, cocaine, something like that, like fair trade cocaine
Yeah.
should be in a smart shop. And then coca leaf, you should just be able to grow yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
And I mean, I know chewing leaves is not really like very Western method of consuming, but it's, you know, it's the mildest way. It's like the
Yeah.
most safest way. But there's not really a culture around it here, unfortunately. But maybe that could grow if it's allowed to. And then maybe people would be like happy just chewing some coca leaf and not going for the line of cocaine. Not everybody gonna do that switch
I think
because
that's
also like,
yeah.
you know, if you chew it, your breath of a coca leaf chewer, I've smelled a few times, like it's not pleasant
No.
necessarily, like and it looks kind of funny. So not everybody is just gonna do that switch just because it would be allowed,
Yeah.
but it might, like even like a small dent in somebody's use on a global scale might actually have
Yeah.
quite good
And like
results.
right now, the illegal drug market is controlled by at least the I'd say like the cocaine and the heroin
Yeah,
market is controlled by pretty extreme criminal organizations,
yeah,
which
yeah,
there are a lot of people are killed because of this.
yeah,
And if you actually decriminalize and legalize these things, then you just
yeah,
take that away from them.
yeah,
And
yeah,
either that means there's going to be a switch over where people who were illegal are doing things illegally are going to do things
yeah,
legally,
yeah,
and which means there's a framework to stop them shooting people,
yeah,
or no need for them to shoot people
yeah,
even.
yeah. And I mean, consumer choice is king in a way. And I mean, the Global Drug Survey actually asked whether people would be willing to pay more for fair trade cocaine compared to non-fair trade cocaine, and most of them were. I don't remember the exact numbers, but
Wow.
they were like, yes, I'm willing to pay more because cocaine is
Mm.
already quite expensive, but
Yeah.
still they're willing to put some extra if they know that it comes from a source where the farmer has been paid, the
Hmm.
whoever distributes it has been paid and all that. And I mean, as an idea, it's like, why not?
I guess like that kind of thing is only really possible though. Again, with it being legal, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, indeed.
You were at the UN summit this year, right? Was that this year or?
I've been there every year since 2017 as a civil society representative
Okay.
because Finnish Association for Humane Drug Policy is part of IDPC, or International Drug Policy Consortium, which
Okay.
is this, sort of umbrella organizations for NGOs working in drug policy. And it's been quite an experience. I went there first time 2017, and I mean, I didn't really know how things work on that level, and my motivation was to go and like see whether enhancement drug use is discussed on international
Yeah.
policy level. I can say after few years that it is not discussed on that level,
Okay.
a finding on its own in a way.
What how does like with that with something like that, do you sitting in a room with all of the representatives from each of the UN member states, and do they have a debate, or is it just this is what and they just read out their things and get
Okay,
their
so
point?
there's simultaneously going on quite a lot actually
Okay.
during the Commission on Narcotic Drugs,
Yeah.
which happens in Vienna because that's where the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime is
Okay.
located. So there's sort of the panel, which is more like giving nation states a floor to discuss few things, and that's where they vote on adding new substances into the controlled substances list, usually by the recommendation of the World Health Organization.
Okay.
And that's sort of a interesting ritual to see, like WHO uh, recommends to add this into like whatever the substance is. It's usually like, okay, this has no therapeutic value and it has high potential abuse because it resembles another drug
Mm-hmm.
like this. The non-therapeutic value is like nobody's looked into the therapeutic value of these substances, but they just
They just say
assume
that.
that it hasn't
Yeah.
doesn't have because there's no studies
They say that
showing.
with cannabis, right? Even according to the UN.
Well, now WHO did a critical review on cannabis, which hasn't happened since the 50s, or was it 30s? But luckily, there was sort of a push also from the civil society to get this done.
Yeah.
And in that, they do recommend making some scheduling changes. And it's a complicated sort of system because there's, I think, at least three different international treaties, one from 1961, from 1972, then 1988, and then there was the 2016 UNGAS, the United Nations General Assembly on the World Drug Problem, that was in New York
Oh my
2016.
god.
And
Headache.
there's a lot of legal documents that are sort of the framework how we
Mm-hmm.
deal with this. So there's the panel, and usually, indeed, WHO recommends to add this list, and then countries vote, and they just always just vote yes. Like nobody usually opposes adding another drug into the list. But then it comes to cannabis, the decision to do that vote has been pushed on and on. It was supposed to happen like December 2018, but then they're like, no, we need more time to, or the countries need more time
Yeah,
to think
who
about
is that?
this.
Is that like giving? Is it the WHO has already said, and the UN is now saying the countries need more time, or is it the countries are saying they need more time?
Countries are sort of like, hey, we need more time to think about this issue. And it's, I mean, there's countries like China and Russia that are really against making any changes because they're saying like this will bring give a wrong signal. They're always politicians are like, this is giving a
Oh
wrong
yeah.
message. Like, what's the message that you're saying now? Then, I mean, of course, it's highly political
Mm-hmm.
in so many ways. So it should happen this December. The reassembled or reconvened CND. So the CND is in March, and then they reconvene every December. So this March, when they were again supposed to have the vote, but didn't, and postpone it until December. And the changes are, I mean, it's basically WHO saying that cannabis, or at least some components of cannabis, do have medicinal value.
Yeah.
That's basically what it sort of says. And what the sort of practical result of that, of like, will medical cannabis now be available for everybody everywhere? No, doesn't mean
No.
that.
Individual countries still have
Nation
to. Yeah.
states still make their own legislation about this and so forth. So the impact of it is sort of maybe more symbolic, but it's
Mm-hmm.
important symbolic
Yeah.
as well. Like, I mean, that sort of denial of cannabis as a medicine has been going on for
Um,
100 years
yeah.
now, about, and it's just bullshit. I mean,
Yeah.
and I get that it's so complicated as well. Like, I mean, cannabis has so many molecules that
Mm-hmm.
we don't really know how it does what it does to
Yeah.
some extent. I mean, and our own endocannabinoid system is complex enough as well, and how
Absolutely.
those things interact. There's still, I mean, I'm hoping to spend the rest of my life sort of studying partly that
Mm-hmm.
as well, because I mean, one of my PhD publications was a medical cannabis patient case study from Finland with a ADHD as the main indication. And Finland has had medical cannabis allowed since basically 2008. So it was a
Okay.
court ruling 2006 because of a patient who broke his back in a car accident, tried all the opioids, they didn't work. He traveled actually to Amsterdam, meet a doctor, got a prescription of cannabis, apparently went to a park, used it, and just felt like things just getting into place and like
Wow,
relief.
wow.
And he fought to be allowed to bring that prescription back with him. I think when he arrived, like the customs confiscated, he was like, no, this is my
Oh
medication.
my God.
And that went to like almost all the way to like sort of Supreme Court, not exactly Supreme Court, but
Was he arrested or?
yeah.
Yeah.
And he had to like fight this legal battle. And he was luckily helped by this pharmacist who indeed has been saying for years, like, I mean, this is a milder option compared to opioids. Why are not we using this? Um, so he managed to sort of open the gates. And actually, during that court, they were like, okay, medical cannabis was never illegal in Finland. It was just sort of taken out from the pharmacopoeia like in the 50s.
No way.
And now there's maybe 300 to 400 prescriptions been given, but there's no data on the patients. There's no medical cannabis health program, or there's no government sort of interest almost into this. And like, I mean, they could have started developing medical cannabis in Finland like 10 years ago, but
Yeah.
they didn't. And now you look at the market predictions for it, like they kind of, could have been a leading nation in
Yeah.
this, but didn't.
How did you find somebody then for your study?
In my master thesis here, there was like I had a little survey, and in that survey there was a little quote from somebody with ADHD that said like cannabis gives him a state of hyperattention,
Mm-hmm.
like he
Well, this
can,
is here. Sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That sort of like was the first glimpse of to this, like, and I mean, from personal experience, I don't think that cannabis necessarily helps me to